Going live. Hello, 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 everyone. My name is Dr. Erica Jordan Thomas. I am super excited for another week of Office Hours with JT. And so, if you are here, if you're joining me live, hey, I'm so excited. Feel free to introduce yourself. Tell me where you're logging in from. If you are watching the replay of this conversation, then just drop a hashtag replay in the comments so that way we can continue to build community together. So I'm going to start off with a quick introduction and then I'm going to jump right into it. And so, as I mentioned, my name is Dr. Erica Jordan Thomas. I am a former teacher, former instructional coach, assistant principal, former principal. I started my consulting business in October of 2017. So I've had my personal consulting business for 4 years. And I then went on to, when I started my consulting business in 2017, I was a principal at the time. And then I left the principalship to go back to school full time and get my doctorate in education leadership from Harvard Graduate School of Education. And in March of 2020, I launched my second business, Get Launch Consulting, which is a business that believes in the power, knowledge, and expertise of educators, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds, and provides them with the tools to be able to expand their impact and build their wealth through launching an education consulting business. And so I have a private Facebook community where every other Thursday we launch a poll with questions that people have previously submitted. And folks vote on those questions. And the three questions that receive the most votes, I come live and I answer the following week. So that's what JT Office Hours is. If you are on Instagram and you're not in the private Facebook group, join us. Just click the link in my bio to come on over so that way you can vote on the questions. Folks have the opportunity to add questions as well if there's something you want me to answer. And that's what has happened again for the second Office Hours in a row. Someone added a question and that became the top question that I'm going to answer today. So super excited to jump into it. I'm going to just quickly go over our three questions that I'm going to be answering. And if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes. So the three questions that I'm going to be answering today is, how do I find a niche in workforce training and development? The second question is, how to make authentic connections. And then the third question is systems to use to operate like a actual business rather than a side hustle. That third question is good, child. Ooh, that's so good. I love it, love it, love it. Okay, so for the first question of how do I find a niche in workforce training and development, so I'll name that my background and expertise is not workforce training and development. And so the answer that I'm going to give is going to be more so about strategy of finding a niche and less about how to find a niche in this particular area. So I think this most certainly can apply to the person who submitted this question, as well as others who might be thinking of what does it actually look like to niche down. So let me first name that the more niche you can be in your business, the better. So I think there are some folks who they might be questioning if they should niche down because they're like, well, I want to be able to serve everybody. I don't want, a certain person to not have access. And I hear that and understand it. And when you attempt to speak to everyone, you speak to no one. So I say that in case there's anyone, who's kind of sitting on the fence of like, well, shall I niche down in this area or not? I would tell you yes, to niche down. And I believe that there's no such thing as too niche, because when your people find out that you are their people or that they're your people, their level of commitment and loyalty to you is the possibilities are extremely high. So think about, if someone had a child that had exceptional learning needs that was in pre-K and they were navigating the complexity of their identity, let's say their racial identity, thinking about if they had the option to work with someone who specialized in serving students with learning differences in pre-K versus someone who served students with learning differences in pre-K and also racially identified as, let's say, Black, you're probably going to go with someone who's more niche, right? And so I just use that as an example just to be able to help paint the picture that like niching down is a good thing. So I just wanted to name that first. So I have three questions here for you, or I should say three strategies to for you to kind of think about that will help you niche down. So the first one is thinking about who you serve. So who is your target client? Hey, Jacques. Hey, hey, hey. Happy belated birthday too. So thinking about first, who do you serve? And so thinking about, so there's many different ways that you can think about this, but thinking about identity markers of your target audience. So identity markers could be age, they could be racial identity, they could be geographically, it could be gender, it could be gender identity, gender expression, it could be in terms of language. And so if you Google the identity wheel, that'll pull up a resource that will outline all the possibilities of identity markers, and that could be a way for you to be thinking through: is there a particular identity marker that I'm actually really passionate about, and I get lots of energy from serving, and therefore that might be a way that I want to niche down and serve that particular group. So let me give you an example. You can serve all school principals, or you can serve school principals that identify as Black women in their years 1 through 3 of the principalship. And you might even decide to niche down even more and say in rural areas, right? So like that's an example of how you might decide to niche down, thinking about who you serve. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy is the problem that you are solving. That's another way to niche down, right? And so thinking about getting really crystal clear on the problem that you solve, because some folks might say, they do, we hear this all the time, they do DE&I work, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Folks say, I do DEI work, I do DEI work. Okay, but what's the problem that you're solving? Because everybody got a DE&I problem. And so part of it is that first strategy I just named of who do you serve, but then the second strategy of what is the problem that you're solving. And that could sound like a sense of belonging in classroom environments for students with learning differences, or students from backgrounds that have historically been oppressed in this country, right? So like being really clear on what's the actual problem that you're solving, because when we're naming these big umbrella problems, there's actually many different branches to the problem, right? And so I recall an entrepreneurship class that I took for my degree. There was an example that they shared of how you think about the problem, and one particular example was around the criminal justice system, right? So like thank you, Iris. For some reason, or Isis, I'm sorry, I mispronounced your name. Thank you, Isis. Someone just called me through Facebook. It was kind of weird. I've never had that happen before, but Isis, let me know if I'm back in terms of sound. But the visual was like the problem. Oh, you can't hear me. Okay. If I could get folks, if you're live with me, all right. So for IG, I'm going to end this and then I'm going to come right back. So that way I can get my sound working. Give me 1 second. Okay, yeah, folks can hear me on, they can hear me on Facebook, but on Instagram for some reason, it is, they cannot hear me. So I'm just gonna pop out and come right back. Give me 1 second. All right. All right. I'm back on IG. Okay. So I was naming that there was a entrepreneurship class that I was taking. Thank you, Daphne, for confirming for me on Facebook. There was a entrepreneurship class that I was taking, and the example that they were using was like the criminal justice system. And there are so many different branches to that. For my people who are joining me on IG, just let me know if you can hear me now, if my sound is back, and thank you all for rejoining me. I had a random call through Facebook Messenger. Child, first off, didn't know that they could do that. Like, it was super random. So I think that was the issue with my sound. So IG folks, shoot me a message and let me know if you can hear me now. But they mapped out the thank you, Jennifer. Perfect. So they mapped out the criminal justice system almost like a tree and all these branches, right? So, like, what are the different entry points into the system? And in this entry point of like, you are charged, and then you are assigned a court date. Like, there was this like tiny branch of like the communication process that people receive around their court dates. And this particular organization, the problem they were solving was, what they were finding is that there were people who, were having these court dates, but the communication that they were receiving, like, sometimes they either wouldn't receive the communication because they didn't have the right phone number or whatever on file, or if the person had a last minute conflict, there was no way for them to communicate that information. So that obviously was creating a whole nother situation of people missing court dates. And now you have, a whole nother situation. So this organization was actually focusing on building a communication app or system that would actually allow for folks to be able to communicate that type of information. So I share that of like, that's so niche, right? Like, it was one branch on the tree. And so I named that as an example of, what's the problem that you solve? If you were to map out the area that you want to solve in your business, let's say it's teacher development, what are all the branches to teacher development? All right, there's content, there's, classroom culture, there's planning, there's relationships. Like, there's so many different branches, and each one of those branches have little mini branches, and they have leaves. And like, it is totally okay to pick a single branch or to pick a single leaf, right? So like, if you want to go deep on assessment planning in middle school science classrooms, like, that was a great mini branch leaf to be able to hone in on. So that is the second strategy of how you can niche down, is niching down through the problem that you're solving in your business. That's strategy number 2. And then strategy number 3 of how to niche down is the actual services that you deliver. So you can niche down by who you serve, you can niche down by the problem that you solve, and then lastly, how do you solve the problem is another way to niche down, right? Because it might be that you only do professional development. It might be that you have actually developed a learning experience for your clients that's a phased learning experience, right? And so it takes people through phase 1, that's some type of discovery and assessment. It takes people through phase 2, that's rebuilding, and then it takes people through phase 3, that's like implementation and monitoring or something. So that's another way to niche down. So let me know in the comments of those 3 strategies, who you serve, the problem you solve, and the services you deliver. Let me know either what way you're currently niching down out of those 3 strategies: who you serve, problem you solve, or services. Which way are you currently niching down? And or which strategy do you want to use to niche down just a little bit more? Let me know in the comments and give me some feedback. And of course, I say all this to say that as you're niching down, you shouldn't niche down just for the sake of it. Like, you need to be niching down in an area that you're really passionate about, that gives you energy if you're spending more time there, that it doesn't feel like work. So I say this to say that, like, you want to be able to find this healthy balance of, like, whatever is the thing you niche down into, like, it should give you energy. Um, so I know I can niche down. Um, I know when it comes to school leaders, I could niche down to rural school leaders, but that wouldn't give me energy. Like, that hasn't been my experience as a school leader. I know the context there briefly through my mother's side of my family, but like that just wouldn't give me energy in the same way. So I just want to be able to note that as well. Okay, so that's the first question. So question number 2, how to make authentic connections. Um, oh, I'm just sitting here reading some comments. I see Jen named the services I will provide. Lauren named helping school leaders have clear data practices that support and drive school improvement. Come on, Lauren. We see you, Lauren. We see you. Siobhan named early childhood education workforce addressing topics outside of health and safety. Listen, okay, I just want people to know. I'm gonna name a trend. People who went through Get Launch Consulting, they real clear about their niche. I'm just saying, let's go, GLC alums. Love it, love it, love it. All right, so the second question is how to make authentic connections. So this is a great question, and I've come up with 3 strategies, 3 suggestions for you, because consulting and running your business, like, it's relationships are huge. They're huge. And so I love the spirit behind this question, because your ability to make authentic connections is going to directly impact the effectiveness and success of your business. So 3 quick strategies here. The first is lower the stakes, right? So, and making authentic connections, I think part of the way that we can kind of psych ourselves out is we step into the relationship with an ask top of mind, or with a need top of mind, and or we step into it with what type of transaction already that we have in mind that we want to engage in with the person. And so when I say lower the stakes, I mean go into the conversation, into the interaction with no transaction in mind. I'm hesitant to say agenda because depending on who it is, like, just to have an effective use of their time, you might have some like clear kind of outline or bullet points of the things that you want to talk about or dialogue you want to engage in. So agenda is a little bit of a strong word, but, like, for example, last week I had a meeting with a funder, and I didn't type out an agenda, but I only had a short amount of time. I knew that there were 3 questions that I wanted to ask, but I wasn't pressed. I was like, if we don't get into all 3, then I'm cool. But you got to feel out the power dynamic, right? Like, are you driving the conversation? Am I driving the conversation? Do you have an agenda? And I got one in my back pocket. So I had these 3 questions that I knew that, I'm going to pull these out, and this is where we can go in the conversation, because I want to make best use of my time. And so that for me was like a roadmap of the conversation. That's a better word rather than agenda. Like, what's the roadmap for the conversation? How do you want to engage in dialogue with that person? So that's my first recommendation, is like, lower the stakes. like if you just happen to be sitting next to someone on the train, on an airplane, or like randomly at, a social function at a wedding, and you're just having dialogue, like approach it in that mind frame of, like, lower the stakes, make it a conversation, make it a dialogue. And I think oftentimes we come into these types of, like, entry conversations or entry points in a relationship assuming that we're going to click and connect with everyone, and that's not always the case, and that's okay. And you don't have to force it. There have been a lot of great people who have really powerful titles that I've met, and I spent time with them, and I'm like, we don't click. So, like, I mean, it would be nice to say this person is my mentor or this person is, I have a great relationship with them, but the reality is we don't connect personally, and like our time feels forced. And that's okay. That's totally okay. So I just share that as a strategy of like lower the stakes for yourself, because sometimes we go into these conversations like expecting the transaction, and it's like what could it just look like to spend time and be in relationship with the other person to get to know them. So that's the first thing. The second strategy around making authentic connections is being visible. And I said this a number of times during previous office hours of of oftentimes in order the first point of connection with folks, the more visible you are, the more connections that you're organically and naturally creating. So for example, um, it's becoming more and more frequent that like I'm getting messages from people on social media who's like, so and so recommended that I follow you. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And I'm so glad we're connected. And I know that that's a direct result of me being consistent and being visible and showing up. And so this visibility, and this is where you can't psych yourself out, because I think some people measure visibility by comments and likes. That's not how we measure visibility. And that's where you want to get a little bit deeper into your insights. Like if you're looking at your insights on social media, it's the impressions that you want to be looking at, which is how many people actually saw your post. They saw what you were posting. So I might only get 20-30 likes, but I get 1,500 impressions, where it's like 1,500 people saw this post. So that's where, that's another kind of strategy, is just being visible. And social media is one way. Another way is conferences. Another way is webinars. You could go live. You can send, even if you were to send, I have a couple folks in my network where they send a quarterly personal email update, where like at once a quarter, they just send out an email to folks in their network. Folks are BCC'd, and they're just like, hey, I just want you to know this is what I'm up to. So approach it as, again, not a transaction. Lower the stakes of like just being in relationship and connecting with people. And then the third strategy that I have for you is to nurture the relationship. So when we're talking about how to make authentic connections, nurturing the relationship is a part of that. So if you reach out, and I'll share with you a little bit of my strategy and how I'm thinking about this, is that for my people who are Myers-Briggs people, I'm an ENTJ. The T stands for thinking. The opposite of the T is the F, which is feeling. So for me, I would say that I don't lead with the relationships, I lead with thinking. So for me, I have to be a little bit more strategic around my strategy of connecting with people, because for me, that my default isn't around connections. My default is around information. And so because of that, how I've learned over time how to build that skill set is, and it's no surprise, if I'm a thinker, I need a strategy of like what's the strategic way that I can build connections with people. So if I meet someone for coffee or a check-in or update, then part of nurturing the relationship is whatever information they shared with me that like we just made some type of personal connection. Anytime after that moment, anything that reminds me of that connection, I would reach out to the person. So if we had a moment where we were talking about some interest, and then a month later I was reading an article that reminded me of that moment, I would share the article with the person. Just say, hey, I just happened to randomly think about you this week, given, our last conversation, and we were talking about this, came across this article, just wanted to share, hope all is well. Right? And so nurturing the relationship, and when I say nurturing, it's like really being mindful around the things people are sharing with you, listening to that, being present to that, making the connection with it. And then when that person naturally comes back up for you mentally, like, don't keep that to yourself. Like, reach back out and just say, like, hey, I just wanted to check in. How are you doing? Like, what's most pressing for you? Even with some of my friends, I'll just randomly send them a text and be like, hey, I was just thinking about you. What's the last thing you did that brought you joy? Or like, what's the last thing you did to take care of yourself, just to check in and nurture the relationship? So let me know if that resonates with you. And for my folks who are listening, let me know in the comments how you nurture your relationships. What does that look like for you? Or how you might even establish relationships. And so, I mean, there's a world too where you might go through your LinkedIn. I was actually just talking about this with one of the alums of Get Launched, of like, sometimes we forget all the people we have built connections with over our career. So what could it look like to take an hour or two to go through your LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever and just like review all of your connections and pick 10 to 15 people that you just haven't connected with in a while, and you just send them a note and it's just like, hey, like, I'm it's been a while, I would love to reconnect and hear about how things are going for you. That's a way that you can stay in relationship and reconnect with people. So that's question number 2, is how to make authentic connections. All right, so we're moving on to question number 3. Yes, come on, Siobhan. Siobhan says, just did a few Facebook Lives last month on building and maintaining relationships. Yes. And sometimes we make this overly complicated. Sometimes authentic connections are like, how would I want other people to treat me? Like, that's like, and this is as someone, again, who's a thinker and not a feeler. Sometimes when someone does an action that's nurturing their relationship with me, I make a mental note of like, oh, I should do that too. Like, that's okay. That's a strategy I can add to my my toolbox. Okay, moving on to question number 3. Systems to use to operate like an actual business rather than a side hustle. This is so good. I believe Kendra submitted this question for our poll. Can I just say, I still feel so fancy drinking coffee during our live. I might have to do this like during each office hours. I feel like that's appropriate during office hours to drink coffee. This is great. I love this. All right. So I got 3 systems for you. And actually, let me name this first, because I was talking about this with a couple of my friends lately, of getting a little, noticing an observation that a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, and shoot, it may not always be early stage, but a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with the operations part. Like, I've had a number of experiences in the past few weeks where I've reached out to different businesses or folks, like, really interested in their services to, be able to, like, I'm trying to spend my money with you. And I send an email, I don't get a response. I call, I don't get a response. And so I share this to say that out of the mind frame as an entrepreneur, that as you grow and build your business, the ratio that you're spending on client delivery versus business infrastructure is going to shift and change. So, oh, come on, tea time with Dr. EJT. Oh, I like that. So I say this to say, because when you start early on in your business, you could have 80-90% of your time in service delivery and 10% of your time in business infrastructure. But as you grow and scale and you surpass the 6-figure mark and you're on your way to the multiple 6-figure mark, or you're in the multiple 6 figures, it's going to be about 50-50, if not more, leaning towards the business infrastructure direction. because it's like having a school of one classroom to 30 classrooms. Like, you may not need a procedure for dismissal when you got one classroom. It's like you open the door, the kids get on the bus. But then when you have 30 classrooms, it's like, okay, now we need some type of infrastructure for lunch, for dismissal, for early pickups, for late arrivals. Like, we need infrastructure because now it's the volume of the work that we are doing has multiplied, and now we need a structure. So I say that as a way to help you get in that mind frame to anticipate that, because early on in your business, you can get away with not having a system for client onboarding. You can get away with that because, the number of clients are manageable. But when you get to serving 30, 50 clients and you don't have a system for client onboarding, it's going to become an issue. So here are 3 types of systems that I'll share with you that the earlier you can put them in place, the better it will help, sustain you as you go into your growth. Because there are some things, again, you can put in place when you need them. And then there are other things that it's like you want to kind of be a few months ahead of predicting this is where we're going to get to. So I want to put it in place now. So I'm going to share with you 3 systems. So the first system is going to be some type of team management, internal communication systems. So in order to go from a side hustle to a business, your team is going to grow. Your team is going to grow. So most folks, their first hire is going to be some type of virtual assistant, executive assistant. And then as your team grows, you're going to start working, you're going to start building team members. It might be you're bringing on consultants. It might be that you are partnering with more coaches. It might, depending on your business model, what that next hire might be. It might be you bring on a social media manager. Like, your team is going to grow. So you're going to need some type of system for team management and team communication. And I'll give you a couple of examples what this looks like. So the first system you're going to need some type of structure of like meeting structure for how you're meeting as a team. So ideally this is weekly. You're going to need some type of weekly team meeting just to like get on the same page with important priorities for the week. And so, for example, my team meeting is every week. We structure our agenda to do a first quick check-in. We go over our KPIs, which stands for key performance indicators. And then we essentially kind of go through departments, social media, operations, and then we do a calendar review of like what's coming up for the next month. So that way nothing is taking us by surprise. That's our team meeting. Our team meeting is 90 minutes. It's probably getting ready to change to 2 hours because we're always running over. But that's a weekly team meeting. The second type of team management, internal communication, is you're going to need some type of project management system. So this could be Asana. ClickUp is another one that a lot of people use. Trello is another one a lot of people use. But you need some place where you are housing all of the projects and to-do list and moving parts of your business. So that way there is a common reference point for what's happening. And there's also a way for you to quickly to see what still needs to be done, what's been completed. So my team, we use Asana, but I just named a couple of other options for you. And then lastly, you need some type of internal team tool for like quick communication. So you could communicate via email, but sometimes it's just some things that you just, quicker. It's just quicker just to like do something different and send a message. So for my team, early on, when it was just me and one other person, we were texting, right? And that worked for us. But when we added a third member to our team, we were like, all right, we need to get a system that allows us to text each other, but it's not dependent on our phone. So that's when we brought on Slack. And so that's an example. I know Microsoft Teams is another one, but I haven't looked into that one. I've used it as a part of an organization, but not a part of my business. But I know some people use Microsoft Teams, but it's basically like some type of instant messenger where you can send quick messages. So that's the first type of system. team management, internal communication. If that sparks additional questions for you, let me know in the comments so that way I can make sure that I answer those. And then let there's wisdom in the room too, so let me know in the comments if what you're using for project management, your internal team platform, and or if you have some type of meeting structure with your team. Let me know that in the comments. Okay, so the next system is you need SOPs, which stands for Standard Operating Procedures. So let me tell you two quick stories that explain why you need SOPs. The first quick story. Ooh, that's a good one. Isa said Marco Polo would be good for internal team communication. Ooh, that's really good. That makes me also think about Voxer too. Voxer is like a walkie-talkie app. That's also another good one. Oh, thank you for sharing that. So SOPs, let me share with you a quick story. So me and my best friend, we took a best friend trip last week to LA. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And we were down in the hotel restaurant for breakfast, and we were done. So now we're waiting on our check, and like we're sitting there waiting for like 10-15 minutes. And I'm like, where did our waitress go? Like, what is happening right now? So I flagged down a waitress, and I'm like, hey, like, I'm not sure where our waitress went, but we're ready for our check. And she was like, oh yeah, your waitress is on break. And I'm like, oh, like, okay, I didn't know, like, we didn't receive the memo, but like, can we get our check? She was like, yeah, I'll bring you your check. She leaves, she comes back. I get my check, but then my best friend, she gets the wrong check. And so I'm like, we have to flag her down again. She comes back, and the check was still incorrect. So I just say that's an example of when an SOP is missing. It's like, what's the standard operating procedure for when someone goes on break? or what's the standard operating procedure for, how to do people's checks, because if someone else slides in, they should easily be able to find the check for the table. So that's just an example. Another example from a school context is a lockdown, right? So a lockdown is an SOP. And y'all, let me tell you, every year, we always had to make sure it was clear. The SOP, because it would be the way of the universe that we would have a lockdown the day we got a sub. And if the sub didn't have the SOP for a lockdown, it'd be the one classroom where the door is unlocked or the window isn't covered or everybody in there chit-chatting and talking. Like, that's an example of when an SOP is not in play, is when a team member is not present, things fall apart. That's when that's evidence that you don't have an SOP in place. So SOPs, standard operating procedures, basically outline the procedure for how you do everything in your business, such that anybody can step in at any moment and things don't fall apart. So I'll just share with you a quick strategy for how you can build SOPs in your business. And I'm sure, if you Google, you'll probably find templates and examples and stuff. But how I build SOPs in my business, because when I say SOP, it's a document that literally lists the step by step of this is how this procedure is done. So it's like, you go to this link, you click this thing, it might have some screenshots, and then you input this, and then you want to send this to this person. It is literally a step by step of how something should be done. So how I do SOPs in my business, and how I started to do SOPs when it was just me, was I would use Loom, Loom, which is a screen recording software. You could also use Zoom just to record your screen of you literally doing the task. So I would record every time I'm doing a task that I had planned to delegate to someone, whether it was immediately or in the future. I would just record myself doing the thing. And then when I hired someone or brought someone on board, that was a part of their onboarding, was to watch the video to learn how to do it, and then they would write up the SOP. And then I would review it, give them some quick feedback, and then we actually house all of our SOPs in an Airtable, and that's a whole process. But that would be my suggestion in terms of how you can start building SOPs. If you don't have a team yet, at least just record yourself doing the task, so that way when you bring someone on, you can just share the videos and they can write the SOPs. That can be one of your first tasks for your virtual assistant. So just a couple of examples of SOPs. So like client onboarding, like when you get a new client, what's the SOP for what happens? Like, do they have to schedule an appointment? Like, is the first thing they have to schedule time with you? If they do have to schedule time, do they get that sent via email? Is it a Calendly link? Is it an Acuity link? Are there certain days that you only meet on? Do they have to fill something out before the appointment? How long is the appointment? So like that should all be captured in SOP. Another example of the SOP is failed payments. What happens when you have a failed payment? Again, that should be clear, so that way anybody can step in and manage that process. All right, and then the last system that I'll name of just to use to operate like an actual business rather than a side hustle is you need policies. So I want to be clear around the difference between procedures and policies. A procedure is like how you do something. A policy is like the rules. Like this is the rule for X or Y. So for example, what's your refund policy? That's a rule versus a procedure. So, you'd want to have established some policies in your business, and I'll give you a couple other examples of what I mean by policies. You're going to want some type of so back up. Contracts are the kind of manifestation of policies. So contracts are a form of policies, right? Of like your termination policy, your confidentiality policy, your payment policy. Like contracts are actually kind of a culmination of a ton of different policies. And so that's why contracts are so important, because it's an agreement that you're both agreeing to these policies. So that's one type of example. And then another example is like terms of services. So terms and services are more so of like if you have an online course, people may not be signing a contract, but they're agreeing to terms and services. Because as terms and services means we're not necessarily in relationship with one another, but we are agreeing to a set of rules, such as you can't use my content outside of this forum. Like you can't take it and use it for your own personal gain. So terms and services, another one. A privacy policy, which if you have any type of, if you're collecting any type of information online, you should have a privacy policy, which is basically letting your clients know the rules of how you will use their information, of like, I won't share your information. That's another form of a policy. So I would like lump all of those things under kind of like the legal bucket. Like that's all of those, that legal structures are the other way to move from a side hustle to a business. Is as you grow, your legal structures have to be tighter, like your independent contract agreement. Like as you grow, you're gonna want to get that tighter around what it actually says for when someone works with you. There should be some type of confidentiality policy in it, and usually there is. But like, what's the termination clause? Do you have to give people notice, or can you terminate at your discretion? So those are just 3 examples of systems: team management, internal communication, SOP, standard operating procedures, and then policies, which are your legal infrastructure. Again, these are things that early on in your business, you can get away with not having, but as you grow, they become more and more critical. Like for example, when I first started, we didn't need to have an SOP for failed payments because I didn't experience them really that much. But then as we grow, and now we're having 50, 60, 100 clients whose payments are reoccurring per month, we would have at least probably like 2 to 3% failed payments every month. And we don't have the capacity as a team to be sending one-off emails. We actually had to have an SOP and a whole automation for that, where it would automatically notify people and would automatically attempt to reattempt the payment. And then when it gets to a particular point, then someone automatically gets unenrolled from everything. So let me know if you have quick questions about that. Happy to answer those, but those would be 3 systems that I would name for you all. So I'm so excited by this last question because as you all know, I have been in the lab of Get Launch Consulting doing a lot of behind the scenes work. And I know there are some people who have been with me for a moment whom they've been like, when are the doors opening? When are the doors opening? Because the last time we had enrollment open was April or May. So it's been about 6 months since we've opened enrollment. And just to share with you a little bit about what me and my team have been doing during these last 6 months, we've been actually working to transition the program from 12 weeks to 9 months. So that is a lot of systems that we up leveled in order to make that transition. And one of the transitions that I've made is actually updating the framework to have a 4th phase of systems. And so I've added to the program a whole section on systems that walk you through building the systems of your business. So I'll walk you through building your SOPs. I'll walk you through building what's called your tech stack of what are the tools that you need to sustain the growth of your business. I'll walk you through how to hire your team. And so I love the spirit of this question because as I've done Get Launch Consulting for 7 cycles, and in talking to alumni, I've been able to see the patterns of ways we can continue to support people. And that's been one of the biggest pieces of feedback of like, JT, like I'm trying to figure out these systems, like what should I use for this? What should I use for that? And so I've taken the step to actually include that in the program. And then just a little bit of the rationale between 12 weeks to 9 months, because that's definitely a shift, is realizing that like when I think about the transformation I want to be true for everyone in the program, we need more than 12 weeks to get there, because I want you to have the community and the container to not just learn, but to also implement and iterate. So after the 12-week mark, it's like usually it's time to do, but then it's like, all right, we're getting ready to graduate. And it's like, but I want to keep you. I want to like stay in relationship. So that way, when you have your first webinar, you have your first IG live, if you submit your first request for proposal, or you get your first 5-figure contract, like you're still in this learning container where you have access to a coach. And we can actually give you feedback on all of that stuff. And so I'm really excited about that opportunity, because my vision is this is bigger than just launching a consulting business. For me, this is around building the wealth of educators. And my personal goal, which we're going to be sharing this information with you all over the next couple of weeks, of some of these, this clarity that I've gotten, some of the up leveling, some of the updates that we made. We've gotten really clear on our goals for the program. And one of our goals is that we're increasing the net worth of our clients by 20%, that we're supporting you and replacing your income, and we're helping you make an additional 3 to 5K per month. I need 9 months with you to do that. it is so possible. It's so possible. But we need longer than 12 weeks, because my vision is that every client I work with, we grow you to a 6-figure business. And I'm gonna be honest, 6 figures is the floor. It's the floor. But that's the first milestone. I gotta get you there first. And once I get you to 6 figures, we're gonna go to the next level together too. But that's the first step. And so I just named that just to kind of give you all an update, because I know some people are just like, when are the doors going to open? What's taking so long? It's like, we are getting the table set for you. And and we are adding more things in, so that way we can really create a pathway and container for you to be able to get to a six-figure consulting business if you do the work, right? Like, you got to do the work. I can't do the work for you. You got to do the work. But if you do the work, like, and when I say do the work, meaning you show up, you do the curriculum, you leverage the coaching, you leverage the community. If you need something, you ask for it. Like, we will get you there. So I just say all that to say that if you are not on the wait list, you want to be on the wait list. And I know people are like, tell it, just open it, just open it. If you're on the wait list, you will get new information before Thanksgiving. So I'm telling you, get on the wait list. Siobhan, check your email because I sent alumni an email. And if you didn't get an email, DM me. But check your email for some alumni news, and that goes for any alumni. You should have gotten an email. So yeah. So get on the wait list. And y'all, I'm rolling out my new brand. I'm so excited. So we'll be sharing more of that with you over the next couple of weeks of just introducing to you our new brand, our vision, our mission, our core values, and more information about the program, because we're opening the doors before the end of the year. If you're on the wait list, you'll have the first opportunity. So thank you all. This is great. We'll have another JT office hours in 2 weeks. The poll will release next Thursday. And so make sure that you are, if you're on Instagram, make sure you're in the Facebook group by clicking the link on my bio. And if you have questions that you're curious about and you want me to answer, add them to the poll. And we've had 2 office hours in a row where someone's question got voted the top one. And so, yeah, you have that option too. So this was a joy as always, y'all. And I look forward to seeing y'all in a couple of weeks. If you're not on the wait list, join the wait list because you'll get some information here before Thanksgiving. And I'm excited to have the opportunity to continue to do this work and see you all soon at the next office hours. All right, be safe, be well.